First, thank you, Ben, for the very kind introduction, and welcome to my talk. Which titled "The Unit Does Its Job." So, what next? So, first, the one or other of you might have heard already of the unit, and or might also have been at MICCAI last year. So, when Nicolas Ayash got his keynote about 20 years MICCAI, and showed the top 20 cited papers, and I was very surprised that the unit was already on the fourth position there, and since then it has collected a few more citations, and since a few weeks it's the most cited paper of the MICCAI community, and so the people seem to really like it. So like Max, they can always use it as a weak baseline for their research. For us, actually, it works quite okay-ish. So if we now have a powerful segmentation architecture, which seems to work in a lot of different cases, so what we do next, and so here I want to tell you a little bit about research projects going on at DeepMind. So the first one is about segmentation of organs at risk for head and neck cancer radiotherapy planning, which is a collaboration with the UCL hospital in London. The second project, when it works, is a triage recommendation for patients with eye diseases using OCT scans. This is a work together with the Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. And the third one I want to present today is our probabilistic unit for segmentation of ambiguous images, which we have also presented here at the main conference. So for head and neck cancer radiotherapy planning, you need a very precise segmentation of the tumor and the organs at risk to do this planning. So first, usually you have the diagnosis, and this planning CT is taken. Then in the current process, you have a radiographer who is outlining all the different organs on these in the CT scans. Then this is scrutinized by an oncologist and given back to the radiographer if something needs to be improved. Then if the segmentation is fine, it can go into the dosimetric optimization process, so this planning software which then plans where to put all the different beams such that the maximum dose ends up in the tumor and the minimal dose ends up in the organs at risk around it. And with this then you can deliver finally the radiotherapy. So the main bottleneck at this whole process is the manual segmentation, which takes up to 4 hours. You learned yesterday, so that in other countries it doesn't take that long. But at least in the UK and the NHS, we have 4 hours, and with the forth and back between the radiographer and oncologist, because they usually can't do it in one piece. So this takes up to between 4 and 6 weeks in the system until the patient gets their first radiotherapy. And this is something which we want to change. So our goal for this project was to develop a segmentation which can automatically segment all 21 organs at risk in this head and neck cancer setting, and with this reduce the total time needed together with a manual improvement of the segmentation methods, which might be necessary, down to 1 hour or less. So we have done this with a pretty much standard 3D unit. I don't go into detail. If you're interested in the detailed architecture, just come to me, talk to me later, or look into our paper. The gold standard was defined by the standard process, so having a segmentation by a radiographer and reviewed and signed off by an oncologist. And then to measure the human performance, we also have, for each of our scans in the test set, we have a completely independent segmentation from a second radiographer to see how good the agreement between humans is on this data set. So here, qualitative results. So first in the eye region, in the left, you can see here the results of the unit as contours overlaid over the gold standard shown as filled regions. And here on the right, you can see the comparison of the second radiographer to the gold standard. And as you can see, both agree very well. So the unit and the radiographer agree very well with the gold standard. If we go a little bit further down into the mouth region, so where much more soft tissue organs, There we see that especially here in the lacrimals, the parotids, sorry, we have quite a bit of differences between our predicted segmentation and the gold standard segmentation. But if we look into the performance of a second human, also they are not able to do the segmentation very precisely. So the question is now, how can we come up with a quantitative performance metric where we can tell, yeah, well, is our segmentation now good enough or not for the radiotherapy planning? Of course, our ultimate performance metric would be to measure the patient harm or benefit in the radiotherapy due to our segmentation. But this is, unfortunately not possible because this dosimetric optimization process is partially manual, so we can't make an end-to-end solution there. So the best proxy we can come up with is to just measure or find out whether the oncologist would be satisfied with a UNET plus radiographer solution. And for this, standardized coefficient is not really well suited because so oncologists don't think into dices, and it might depend on the size of the organ and so on, so which dice coefficient you might reach. So this is why we suggest a new performance metric here. So we measure the fraction of segmentation surface that is acceptable. And for this, we have proposed here the so-called, or we call it the surface dice coefficient. So if you have a gold standard segmentation and the prediction from the model, then we define a certain acceptable deviation, and then just measure the fraction of the surface which is within this acceptable deviation and the one which is outside. And this acceptable deviation is defined per organ by having two oncologists measuring the distances between the segmentations of two oncologists and then take the 95th percentile of these distances. And then we combine it in the same way like dices are combined in a volumetric way. So here we have these two masks, we have the outlines, then we have, when we have the tolerance, we can just dilate these outlines with the tolerances, and then we can measure the overlap from this contour with this tolerance, and the overlap from this contour with this dilated contour here, and then can come up with a dice which has the same range, or surface dice, which has the same range as a standard dice coefficient. So 0 means no overlap and 1 means perfect overlap. Yeah, so it's measuring the surface, but it's much more robust than the Hausdorff distance, so the maximum distance. I don't go into detail here, so because of time constraints. So then we have our performance metrics. So now we can compare our segmentation results against humans. And so here on the left side, you have in blue bars the result of the model, and green the radiographers. On the right side, you see the difference between the human and the radiographer performance. And so for all organs except for two, we are within 5% bound of this human performance. And if we instead aggregate over patients instead over organs, we are close to human performance for all 24 of 24 patients here. So, and yeah, we are just collecting more training data at the moment for these organs, which are not yet perfect. Yeah, so you can find this in an archive paper. Let me just summarize. So we are performance similar to radiographers for 19 of 21 organs and 24 of 24 patients. The performance metric should be a good proxy for the clinical performance. So this is why we introduced the surface dice here. We do a double grading of each image in the test set to assess the human performance in a reasonable way. All the segmentation data that we have created for this was on open source images, and the source code for the surface dice is available as open source under these links, and many more details are in the archive paper. So the next project I want to talk about is clinical applicable deep learning for diagnosis and referral in retinal disease, which we just published recently in Nature Medicine in the September issue, and the editor liked it so much that we even got on the cover page. The goal here is to provide a triage recommendation for patients with eye diseases using OCT scans. As I mentioned already, this is a close collaboration with Moorfields Eye Hospital. Optical coherence tomography is a technique which creates a high-resolution 3D scan of the retina, and it works somehow like ultrasound, but with infrared light. So this is a very short explanation of it. So here on the left side, you see an image of the back of the eye. So this is what you see when you view through the pupil. And the OCT then scans a region around the macula and creates this very large, high-resolution 3D scans. So usually here 800 by 500 by 100 voxels in size, and in the depth direction it has really microscopic resolution with 2.6 micrometers, so which means we can see the individual cell layers in these OCT scans. From these OCT scans, then we want to create a referral suggestion. So whether this patient needs an urgent referral, this means he needs or she needs to be seen within days. Semi-urgent, which means within weeks. Routine referral, which is within months, or whether it goes to observation only, and the eye problems which they presented might come from something else which is not visible in the OCT. So what we've done here is we have created a two-stage architecture. So we have the first this digital OCT scan, and we apply an ensemble of segmentation networks to generate different tissue map hypotheses. And these are then fed into an ensemble of classification networks, which finally then come up with a diagnosis and the referral suggestion. These segmentation networks have been trained with roughly 900 manually segmented training OCTs. So each of these OCTs was only sparsely segmented, so only 3 to 5 slices per OCT. And the classification network was trained with roughly 15,000 tissue maps with confirmed diagnosis and referral decision. The nice features of these two-stage architectures is first that we have a clinically interpretable representation here in the middle, so which the clinicians can use to scrutinize the work of the network and can see at which position in the image the network has interpreted the image in which way. And the second nice thing is that the whole process here is completely scanning device independent. So the second network only sees segmentation maps, so which means it can really acquire fundamental knowledge about the human eye anatomy and the pathologies without being bound to a certain type of scanner. And finally, we were able to reach the performance of the world best experts here in the referral decision. The architecture for segmentation is a 3D unit with some slight modifications. Again, if you're interested, just come and talk to me or take a look into the paper. And so these units then each instance creates an individual segmentation. And when we display these segmentations as a movie, then you can see that it's quite stable here outside and that there are some uncertainties in the area around the macula. And this is a fundamental feature of medical images, that we always have ambiguity. So you can see here, this region here is very noisy and very dark. So it's really hard to decide which precise, so how the precise layers go here and which precise tissue you have here. And so you can see here our different instances of the model come up with different segmentation solution. All of them are feasible, and we see that also if we ask different experts to segment this image, we get the same kind of variation in this ambiguous region. So you can think of the ensemble is working like an ensemble of experts. The classification network is this really dense net for classification, also nothing special. And so at the end, we have 5 instances for the segmentation network and 5 instances for the classification network. We combine each with each so that we get 25 results. And again, here also the clinician can see in the variation of the results how certain or uncertain the network was about the decision, and also can track back results. So if in some of these classifications here a certain different diagnosis is proposed, then you can go back and see, okay, so why was this network here proposing this diagnosis? Or on the other hand, you can say, you can just see if you interpret this ambiguous image like this, the diagnosis would be like this. If you interpret it like this, the diagnosis would be like this, and so on. So it gives another level of interpretability for the clinician. We then have present the results in a viewer here, so which you might have seen already on the keynote from David on Thursday, where he highlighted our work as a nice example for interpretability. So here we do some projections of the different segmentation classes here and display them as depth maps. And then you can see here in the video, you can say how this fluctuates, so you get a very nice impression about the uncertainty of the model on these images. To have a quantitative evaluation of our model, we have taken the ground truth label, or created the ground truth label from the follow-up history of the patient. So, which means for each patient in our test set, our colleagues at Moorfields went through the full patient files and checked what would have been the right diagnosis at the first visit when the OCT scan was taken. So the labels here are better than human expert quality, because we can see in the future which experts, and of course our model also can do, when the patient presents first. Yeah, if we now look for the first most urgent, so for the most urgent referral here, and do a ROC curve here with the false alarm rate and the hit rate, or 1 minus sensitivity, 1 minus specificity and sensitivity. So you see we get an area under the curve of 99.21, and here's the zoom in of this, and you see our model is quite well. And if we compare it against the experts, you see that only 2 experts, the 2 best experts from Moorfields with over 20 years experience, are close to our performance. So here is statistically not significant lower, while all the other 5 are statistically significant lower. But this is a little bit an unfair comparison, because usually, and there's experts. So usually in the clinical practice, the experts not only see the OCT scan, but they additionally have access to the fundus image, and they have access to some patient summary notes. So at least they know the age and the sex, ethnicity, and so on from their patient. So measuring against an expert who only sees the OCT image does not really reflect the clinical performance. And when we then give experts access to this extra information, so here is again experts with OCT only, and if they get the extra information, you see they improve significantly, and then only 3 of the experts are significantly worse than our algorithm, while the others are on par with it. If we do the same for the full referral, so have the accuracy for all 4 referrals, urgent, semi-urgent, standard, and normal, then we see a similar picture. So our model has an error rate, a total error rate of 5.5%. So according to the number of patients in our test set, everything between 3.9 and 7.3% is not significantly different. And if we look at the experts, again, at the OCT only setting, only the 2 best experts here are on par with the models, all the others are worse. And giving them access to the fundus image and the nodes then improves their performance, that only 3 of them are significantly worse. Here are some confusion matrices, so here for our model. So in this upper right half, you see the diagnosis. In the lower right half, you find the overdiagnosis. And this confusion matrix looks, this is how it looks for our model, and this for the two top experts, again, experts with access to this additional data. And here in the very top right, you see the worst kind of underdiagnosis, so a patient who needs an urgent referral but was sent home or would have been sent home. Luckily, neither our model nor the experts do this very harmful errors. But at the end, it means, so if you look at these different errors, so for example, a patient who is normal but gets an urgent referral, this might interfere with the day's plans of the patient, but at the end, there is no harm for the patient. So just counting the errors is maybe not the best performance metric that we want to have to measure the performance of our algorithm. And what we did here is we asked our colleagues at the Moorfields Eye Hospital to come up with somehow with a metric which weights the adverse consequences for a patient from a wrong referral decision. And of course, this is highly subjective. So what they did was roughly saying, okay, so how many weeks will the treatment be delayed for the patient? Put this in the first row of this matrix here, and then filled the matrix accordingly in the other range. So you see here an underdiagnosis in a triage case is really bad, and overdiagnosis is not so bad. And then if we just sum up all these penalty points, then again we see that our algorithm does quite well. So here the greenish parts of the bars are the overdiagnosis, which are okayish, and yellow to red is then the underdiagnosis. And you can see here again for each expert the bar with OCT only and with OCT plus fundus, and it's again the same picture. An important thing in the medical domain is all the different scanning devices that are on the market, and also the new scanning devices which might come up in 1 or 2 years, and you still want to have your algorithm or your device working. And to check how this our model generalizes to new scanning devices, we took images also from Heidelberg Spectralis device, so our whole training database and so was collected with the TopCon device. And we selected the Heidelberg Spectralis because this is the device with the largest difference in appearance in the image compared to the TopCon image. So here you see this is our TopCon device, this is the Heidelberg device, and they have quite different characteristics. And when we now take an image from this new device and feed it into our original segmentation network, what happens is that it completely messes up the segmentation. And when you feed such a crappy segmentation into the classification network, then of course you also get quite bad results. So here you will get an error rate of 46.6%, which is completely unacceptable. But the nice thing is that you can immediately see, so the clinician can see that something went wrong in this analysis. It's not that they just get a wrong referral decision, but they can see, okay, so here's something wrong, I don't trust the machine here. So which is another nice point of this interpretability. So what we did then was to just collect training segmentation, so draw segmentations for 150 additional images from this second device, retrained the segmentation network, and with this we're able to gain the same performance as we got with the other device. And then we can use this segmentation MED and feed it in the original unchanged classification network and get the same performance as we had in our original network. And we didn't need any diagnosis labels from the new imaging device. So which means you remember that we had roughly 15,000 patients which we needed to train this network. And if every time when a new device comes on the market, you don't want to collect another 15,000 patients, scan their eyes, wait for their follow-up history and to get the labels for this. And we don't need it. We only need to, the network only needs to learn how the tissue types appear in this new scanning device, but that's it. Everything about the eye anatomy and the pathologies have been learned already from the segmentation maps. Yeah, again here for this retraining, we have a unit with device adaptation branches. Details are in the paper. So let me summarize. So we achieved expert performance on the referral decision. The advantages of our two-stage architecture are that we have a clinical interpretable intermediate representation. The classification network acquires universal knowledge of human anatomy independent of the scanning device. We have a simple adaptation to new scanning devices, and we got some kind of uncertainty via this very simple ensemble trick, and we were quite surprised that the unit ensemble was able to nicely pick up this different segmentation modes. And yeah, again, much more details are in our Nature Medicine article, where you can find the full text, open full text version on the DeepMind webpage, so you don't need to pay for it. Yeah, the final project I want to present is our probabilistic unit for segmentation of ambiguous images, which was a spotlight talk on a Wednesday, where you might have seen it already. So medical images, as you have seen already in the presented cases, are often ambiguous. So we might have ambiguities here in head CTs or in the retina OCTs, or also have ambiguities in cancer. So here some cancer scans from the open source LIDC lung cancer data set. And if you give these scans here to different experts, then the different experts might come up with quite different ideas whether this tissue is cancer or not and how it should be segmented. And to be able to reproduce this variety of different segmentations, which are all, so it's not because the experts are bad experts, they know their stuff, but it's just that the information, whether this tissue is cancer or not, is not contained in the image. So you only measure the absorption of X-rays from this tissue, and sometimes you're able from the context then to guess whether this tissue was actually cancer or not. But this information is just deleted. It's not in the image, which means we have an inherent ambiguity. And we want to have a network which is able to not only produce the most likely segmentation, but all plausible segmentations. And for this, we have combined the unit with a conditional VAE, and you see with this architecture, we are nicely able to reproduce the variation of all possible segmentations for a given image. So the applications are quite straightforward. Of course, we can directly use these different hypotheses to propagate them into the next diagnostic pipeline steps, as we have done with this very simple approach already in the OCT work. For radiotherapy, the best fit could be picked by a clinician and adjusted if necessary. So the clinician might have additional data, additional insights, maybe genetics or whatever from the patient, and then combine his insights with these different hypotheses. And of course, these hypotheses could also inform actions to resolve the ambiguities. So just like in a standard differential diagnosis, what is the next step, what you need to do to exclude a certain suspicion that you might have. So this probabilistic unit is based on a deterministic unit. The deterministic unit is for each input image, it always produces the same segmentation map, the most likely segmentation. And to induce this probability, we use a latent space. And in this latent low-dimensional space, all possible segmentation variants get embedded, and then we can sample from this space. So this looks like this. So we have an image. This is fed into the standard unit, and at the same time, it's parallelly fed into a so-called prior network, which outputs a mu and a sigma of an axis-aligned Gaussian in this latent space. And from this Gaussian distribution, we draw a sample, inject it into the unit, have some more layers who are then processing the features from the unit and from the latent space, and then produce a segmentation with a certain variant. Then we can draw a second sample, from this, again, feed it in, get the second segmentation variant, draw the third sample, get the third, and so on and so on. We can do this infinitely. And the nice feature of this architecture also is that all the expensive stuff here, so the UNet and this prior net, has only to be run once. And then the sampling only needs to re-execute this part of the network, which is quite cheap. So we can cheaply generate hundreds or thousands of samples if we need it for a nice representation of the uncertainty there. The training of this network is a little bit more tricky than you might think in the first glance. So of course, we just have a ground truth segmentation and then use a pixel-wise cross entropy to compare the two. But at the same time now we have to decide where to embed this ground truth segmentation variant into the Latin space, because we have, for each image, we might have 4 or even more segmentations. So we need to say where should this ground truth segmentation end up in this Latin space. And this is decided by a second network, which is only used during training, the so-called posterior net. This posterior net sees during training the image and the ground truth segmentation. They are stacked up, fed through the network, and then this network decides where to put this segmentation variant into the Latin space. Again, it just predicts a distribution, a Gaussian distribution in this space. Secondly, we have the prior net, which produces the prior distribution, and both are coupled with a KL loss, so where we train then the prior net and the posterior net to have this nice distribution. And then we can just train this whole beast here end to end and get this embedding. And so here we need also a distribution instead of a single point. So you could also think that it just predicts a single point here. But this distribution is necessary so that we get a smooth embedding in this space. And also during training, you will see so that this posterior distribution at the beginning is quite big, and then with training it shrinks more and more, so until it really only covers the images which are very similar to this specific ground truth image here. Of course, we are not the first one who think about probabilistic segmentation or uncertainty in segmentation. I think the most well-known work is from Kendall and colleagues, so where they just use a dropout to create pixel-wise probabilities. So they only have pixel-wise probabilities, not like our network, which produces complete, consistent segmentation maps. Another very strong baseline is the stochastic learning of diverse ensembles from Batra and colleagues, which is an MED architecture. I will show it in a second how it looks like. And also in the whole image-to-image translation community, you have lots of networks which transfer one image or translate one image to another image. For example, here, a summer image to a winter image or whatever. And there are also networks which do some probabilistic versions. And of course, we can also use this for segmentation. So this is another baseline. So these baselines look like this. So first, the dropout network here, we just insert some dropout layers here and then do the dropout during training and during prediction. The UNet ensemble is what we also used in our OCT project. So just train a bunch of UNets on the same training data set with a different random initialization and with a different permutation of the training data. Then this MED architecture is a UNet which has different heads. Each head creates an own segmentation map or output. And during training, the ground truth is always assigned to that head that produces the most similar output, which means during training, then automatically these heads specialize for different modes. And finally, there is the image-to-image VAE, which has a quite similar architecture. So it's also the idea to combine a UNet with a variational autoencoder. The differences are that they have no prior network. They have a fixed prior. They feed in the prior here at the beginning of the network. And during training, the posterior net only sees the output image, so the segmentation map, but not both images. So this is different in the architectures. We have tested this on lung cancer segmentation, the LADC data set from the Cancer Imaging Archive. It contains roughly 1,000 CT scans from 1,000 patients. And the nice thing is that you have four independent experts segmentation for each. We only work with 2 tiles here, so it's just a toy problem. So, of course, usually you're not interested in the very precise segmentation of these lung tumors. You're more interested in the shape, in the total size of it. We crop lesion center tiles at every position when at least one of the graders has said this is a lesion. After data augmentations, it's 128 by 128. And so in total, we have roughly 9,000 training images, 2,000 validation, and 2,000 test images from this procedure. So here are the results, which you have seen already. So the network, our probabilistic unit, is nicely able to reproduce these different segmentation variants. And what we also can do due to our low dimensional latent space, we can look where these different segmentation variants got embedded. And as you can see here, so obviously the network decided to have a kind of a size embedded along this first axis and some shape variations along the second axis. And we can also use the posterior net and see where the experts end up in this space. And according to our probabilistic network, the expert number 3 has done the most likely. Oh, by the way, the circles here are the Gaussian 1 sigma, 2 sigma, and so from this prior distribution. The expert 3 has done a quite likely segmentation, while here from expert 0 or network thinks that it's quite unlikely. Yeah, so I see I have to speed up a little bit. So here are the results from the baseline. The dropout unit does not, doesn't produce full segmentation maps, only pixel-wise probabilities. The image-to-image VAE has really problems to get the specific distribution of this image here. So it seems to learn more the global distribution of lesions or not lesions and apply it to every image. The unit as ensemble produces nicely consistent segmentation maps, but they are all very similar to the mode, so the most likely segmentation. The MED-NeurIPS does a pretty good job in creating a diverse set of segmentations and also consistent segmentations. And here is the results of the probabilistic unit. To measure the performance of it, we use the so-called energy distance. Again, I might skip this because of time. So at the end, you compare the average distance between samples from the 2 distributions to the average distance from within distribution samples. And with this, we see here for 1 sample, 4 samples, 8 samples, and 16 samples from our network that the unit performs quite favorably. So here the energy distance lower is better, and only the MED-NeurIPS is very close. So obviously, with a certain number of heads, it's possible to get all variations of this data set. So we have done some more experiments on the Cityscapes data set, which is a much more challenging segmentation data set where we introduced artificial label flips. So for example, here we introduced a second new class, Sidewalk 2, and flip between Sidewalk and Sidewalk 2 in 47% of the cases. Then in 41% of the cases, we flip from person to the new label person 2, and so on. In total, we get then 32 different segmentation modes. And when we then look at the energy distance here, you see that the probabilistic unit, again, is able to pick up all these modes very well, while the MED-NeurIPS cannot deal with a combinatorial explosion when you have multiple things in the image which change independently or very independently from each other. Yeah, here again, I don't go into detail. I only show here the final result. We also see that the probabilistic unit does very well calibrated outputs. So if we look at the probability of the ground truth of a certain mode, and the probability that the network created the different segmentation variants, And the probabilistic unit, it's very well calibrated. So this means if you have a certain segmentation variant, which only appears 5% in the training data set, then it will only, quite precisely appear in 5% of the cases in your predicted segmentations. Yeah, with this, let me summarize. The unit is a probabilistic unit is a combination of a standard unit with a conditional VIE. It's able to produce the full distribution of plausible segmentation maps for an ambiguous image. Compared to baseline, it has the nice feature that you can have an unlimited number of samples. The sampling process is very efficient. There's no need to adapt the model during training time to the number of hypotheses that you want to have. It has nicely calibrated probabilities. And in total, this multi-modal segmentation setup allows to quantitative evaluate generative models. So it's not about an inception score and look at the models, how nice the images look. The source code is available on Simon's GitHub page, and the fine details are in the NeurIPS paper. So with this, let me draw some conclusions. I started with the unit does a job, so what next? In my opinion, this is we want to bring our algorithm into clinical practice. For this, the ultimate performance metric is patient benefit. So we should take care that we measure this by using representative test set with the highest possible gold standard labels, have problem-specific performance metrics for realistic estimate of the real-world performance. Our two-stage architecture then provides interpretability and device independence. And the second big thing which is next is we should get rid of the deterministic models and go probabilistic. Because in the clinical setting, the clinician needs to be able to combine the results from our tools with information from other domains. And for this, he or she needs, or our tools must provide all probable outputs and not only the most likely one. So with this, I'd like to thank Ender, Hervé, Ben, and Marlene for the kind invitation. I'd like to thank all the colleagues who contributed to the radiotherapy project, especially Stan, Sam, and Joe, all who contributed to the OCT project, especially Jeff and Piers, and to the probabilistic unit, here especially Simon, Bernardino, Ali, and Danilo, and our program and product managers, and of course, Moose, who is the leader of DeepMind Applied. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.